The content of this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your mental or physical health. The views expressed are those of the host and guests and do not replace personalized care from a licensed professional.
Welcome to Mindful Moments with Pedro Morante, a space where a nurse practitioner and educator shares real talk on mental wellness, mindfulness, and navigating life in and out of healthcare. Let's take a moment to breathe, reflect, and grow together.
Welcome back to Mindful Moments. I'm so glad you are all here. Before we dive into today's conversation, I want to take a moment to say thank you to all our listeners and our dear followers. We recently celebrated 1 year of Mindful Moments with Pedro Morante, and it has been an incredible journey, and happy first year anniversary to all of us. Over the past year, we had the privilege of sharing conversations with inspiring mental health professionals, advocates, and leaders, all in one goal: to create a space where we can learn, grow, and normalize conversation around mental health. So whether you've been with us since episode 1 or you're just joining us today, thank you for being part of this amazing community. Now, today's episode feels like the perfect way to kick off our second year. We're diving into a topic that doesn't get talked about enough in healthcare. Can you build a career that fills you up instead of burning you out? So healthcare is full of incredible people who dedicate themselves to caring for others, but who's taking care of them? Can you build a career where you're excited to show up on Monday? Can you care deeply for patients without completely emptying your own cup? Our guest today believes you absolutely can. Joining us is Paige Oliver, founder of Blooming Minds Psychiatry, where she provides integrative mental health care for children, teens, and adults across Georgia and the state of Florida. What I love about Paige's approach is that she believes mental health care should never be a one-size-fits-all. At Blooming Minds Psychiatry, care goes beyond symptoms and diagnosis to consider the whole person, including physical health, sleep, nutrition, stress, relationships, trauma, and the many factors that shape our well-being. Paige, welcome to Mindful Moments, and I'm so happy that you are here, and we're so excited to have you here, especially as we celebrate this new chapter for this podcast of ours.
Thank you so much, Pedro, for having me.
Thank you. It's a dream come true, also in the bucket list. I've been following you in your social media and also the work that you do. And for those meeting you for the first time, tell us a little bit about your journey and what first sparked your passion for mental health, and when did it become your calling?
That's such a good question. So I really started my career as a nurse in ICU. So I think whether I wanted to treat mental health or not, it was presented right in front of me. So I started in ICU and doing adult ICU, critical care unit. And then I went to mother baby. So completely different shift there. But in my interest kind of grew there also about postpartum depression, and learning about just women and what they go through mentally after they have a child. And I originally went to school for a family nurse practitioner. And I think that, the universe just had other plans, that I didn't land a job right out the gate in family practice. And I landed a job in mental health at a community service mental health board in Thomasville, Georgia. And I have been there for the last 8 years. And so I always say mental health kind of chose me in a way. When I started there, I was thinking, okay, maybe I'll stay here for a few years and kind of get my feet wet and maybe move on to a different family practice job. But I absolutely fell in love with treating mental health disorders. And I was like, I need to go back to school because I obviously didn't know enough from a family practice perspective certification. And so I went back for my PMHNP. So I really think it chose me. And so I think that's a lot of people's journey. Maybe they didn't start as a nurse in mental health. Maybe they, once their family practice or PMHNP kind of started in mental health. But that was kind of my background. But I'll never do anything else. I absolutely love mental health and treating mental health disorders.
Thank you, Ms. Paige, for sharing your personal journey about your journey as a nurse practitioner. And as they said, there's like redirection and it leads you to a beautiful destination. And I think we are needing so much mental health providers right now, especially with this economy and everything that is going on to the world. And we want to make sure also that you as a mental health advocate and a provider is able to treat more patients because we're so short right now. Now, when you say building a psychiatric career, you don't need to escape from. And I really love this when you filled out our guest form. What inspires that idea and why do you think it resonates with so many clinicians right now?
Well, I think, when you enter the mental health space as a provider, I think for those of us, especially that have been in the space for multiple years, there is a level of burnout that tends to happen. It doesn't always, but I hear it from multiple clinicians. And I was kind of feeling that myself, working at a community mental health center, seeing a large amount of patients a day, just can be very tiring mentally. And so I was like, okay, what can I kind of do for my end? Because it's all about longevity for me. So I was like, I know I want to do this and I'm very passionate. It wasn't really for me compassion fatigue. It was just, okay, I don't feel like I'm serving my patients well, seeing 20 to 30 patients a day. That's just way too much and not safe. So I was like, how do I create this balance for myself and for them? And so that was kind of the idea behind Blooming Minds Psychiatry and starting my own practice is, I wanted to have a space that was safe for me and felt doable from day to day, maybe not seeing that many patients. So it's all about, for me, quality over quantity. So still providing high level psychiatric care, but not feeling like my brain is burnt at the end of the day and having something left to give at the end of the day. Because I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I'm a family. So, I want to be able to give back to those people also and not feel like I just gave it all away all day. So just creating that balance is something that is really important.
I think a lot of providers can relate that they've been seeing large volume of patients. And sometimes they'll just do a straight medication follow-up with that, even taking some time with the patient, addressing some needs of them. And it could be overwhelming when we talk about psychiatry. Some of them could have a complex cases, so we really don't need to spend time with them and get to know them as our patients. And a lot of providers also can relate about being burnt out. That's what they kind of question themselves. Is this the really job that I really want to do in the long term, since they're draining out or feeling some mental health struggles with themselves due to the overwhelming and there's really a need to solve that problem, provide more opportunity for them to get to know to practice on their own way of styles and being able to balance it out. Now, you started your Blooming Minds Psychiatry, which is your private practice. Can you tell me more about your private practice for those who are tuning in right now and for the patients that will be looking for you, your state? Can you tell me the story behind Blooming Minds Psychiatry and also tell us what you do?
Yeah, so Blooming Minds was something that I'd always kind of had in the back of my mind of starting a private practice. That was something that I was just very passionate about. I think there's nothing like being able to create your own schedule, kind of lay out things how you want things to be done, right? I think especially after you gain experience as a provider, you kind of see, well, maybe I like things done this way and maybe not so much this way. You can create that space and how you want things to flow in private practice. And so for me, that was something that was very attractive, that I could kind of formulate that myself. And also, I mean, the thought behind it was really, I always go back to the saying of grow where you're planted. That's something that I've always had put up in my office, even from when I worked at the Community Service Mental Health Board. And to me, I'm like, sometimes you grow out of a space, though. You've outgrown a space. You have kind of poured your heart out in the space, and sometimes you outgrow things, and that's okay. I think knowing that limitation before that burnout occurs is absolutely necessary. And so, you know, checking in with yourself, making sure, okay, are you in your own therapy? Are you, how's your own mental health doing? Because like you said, you have to have that balance of, we all want to be great providers. And that's the reason why we went into this, and we want to serve patients well. For me, it was just, you know, I want to do this for the long haul, and what is doable for me in private practice is something that I can kind of, if I need to shift an appointment to, like you said, sometimes those short appointments, it's complex patients, they're not really getting the care that they need and deserve. So if I create a space where, okay, I can see a patient for, you know, 30 minutes or an hour if I need to, I can absolutely do that in private practice, where at other entities, maybe, you know, we're very limited with that. So there is options, and I think options are good to be able to kind of flex between. And that's just, and the other thought behind Blooming Minds, I think, is for me long-term as a mom is, you know, showing my girls that, you know, a women-owned business in the South can absolutely happen. It can happen. You can be a provider in a rural area, and you absolutely can achieve those goals. So I'm very much about teaching them, hey, let me kind of show you how this is done and how mom has kind of navigated this. And so they're very much a part of this work that I'm doing and watching me build this practice. And I think that that's so important. I have 2 little girls, so I think that that's super important for them to see, and kind of taking them along with me, because that kind of paves the way to inspiring them to do whatever they want to do. You can do it. It is achievable. And so I think a lot, especially in my area, being a very rural area, a lot of people say, I could never do that, or that's something that I just don't think I could put myself out there like that. You absolutely 110% can. You know, I'm living proof. So I think it's all about your willingness and what your goals are, because you have to always, I go back to, what is my goal for my practice, but also the community that I'm serving. And so I'm still in that same community that I was in at the Community Service Mental Health Board, which is interesting, but it just looks a little bit different now. So I have a few different clients. Some were the same that have followed me to private practice. So it's just an interesting transition for sure.
Thank you, Ms. Paige. And you talk about women empowerment, like stepping out of your comfort zone, and you want to set a good example to your daughters. And that's something that you are working on too. So I really adore you for that. So what does success means to you right now?
I feel like success in this stage of my life is, you know, I think we live in a world where, okay, the economy is kind of uncertain. So we're trying to make an income, right? So, you know, I think, you know, making an income is important, but overall success to me would be, you know, building a solid business that I know with integrity that I'm serving my patients to the best of my ability. And so that means for me, being able to provide those appointments and those times that's needed, and that high quality psychiatric care that I know they deserve. And so that's, to me, it's already been a huge success. If I just have one patient that walks in the door and for that week, they said, you know, no one has really taken that time with me, and no one has really discovered that diagnosis or really dug deep into testing, or no, I didn't try that medication, and really opening up that conversation. That to me is what success looks like as a psychiatric provider. Because we always, I think, go back to, we want to serve our patients well. And so having a business, even just a small business, you know, having that impact, if I can have that on just one singular person, I mean, that's success to me.
I love it. And especially coming from you and empowering the women out there that they can also step out and do this job, and in the private practice is possible. And very important also is going back to our why, right? Why are we doing this? It's not for financial gain, Matt. The main point is that to help more people out there that are really struggling with mental health disorders. Right. And then at the same time, we want them to feel validated, right? We want them to have like the feeling that we're building a therapeutic alliance with them.
Absolutely.
That they have a safe space for them to talk about their mental health, because sometimes they could be so hurried, invalidated, and then their needs are not met, and then they tend to jump from one provider to another. And then there's a consistency in their care.
True. And I think it's really important also, one service that I offer at Blooming Minds is having in-person services. I think telehealth is great. I offer both, but I think especially in a rural health community, people really do crave a level of connection with their provider, that it's kind of the old way of going to the doctor, or like, you know, doing a house visit with an MD or an NP. It's really true, because in my community anyway, and I can speak for a lot of the southern communities, it's very normalized to still want to do in-person visits and know who your provider is and make a connection with them. So that's another thing that I created a space for, is I've taken a lot of pride in building my office. You can see a lot of my antiques and some things around me that I love to create a really warm, welcoming space. And then they know that I'm right here in the community with them. So, and I plan on being here for the long haul. I think that's really important. So, I mean, I think there is power in telehealth. I think we have to have that access. That access is very much needed. But I think having in-person services is great too. If you can have that in your community, it's just a 10 out of 10 for me, because that's what I prefer. I prefer seeing my patients in person for sure.
Great. We're so used to telehealth during the pandemic times, and I think it's high time now that we also see our patients in person. And thank you for stepping in and letting the people out there that you also offer in-person. So sort of like hybrid. So they do their initial intake with you in person, and then the follow-up. Can they do it also if they chose to?
Yes. So I offer really both. They could do the initial appointment over telehealth or in person, or they can do a follow-up in person or telehealth. It really can kind of flex. I have some patients that like having more of a hybrid. Like I had a patient call me earlier and said, "Hey, Ms. Paige, like I have a job interview tomorrow, so I'm not going to be able to come in person. But can we switch it to telehealth?" Absolutely. Yes. And I think having that connection with your provider, I love my EMR where they can just send me a direct message and say, "Hey, like I had this come up, like, am I able to kind of flex, and do telehealth?" Absolutely. Most of the time it's going to be a yes. And so, I mean, I'm always cheering for my patients when they are like, "Hey, I have something really positive going on," and trying to be flexible with their schedule as much as possible. I think that just encourages them even more in their mental health journey. I mean, we're doing that together. So
great. And that offers them more options and flexibilities. That also is what a lot of patients are looking for, ability, flexibilities, other options.
Some people don't know that. You can look up your own, but sometimes it can be multiple flowers. But there's one for each of my children. There's one for my husband, a couple for friends and family that are represented. So it just has a lot of close meaning to me. And, explaining that to my patients too, they just always gravitate towards the design. They're like, oh my gosh, Miss Paige, this is great. They love it. And so I think it represents, and I want it to represent that journey and that growth in blooming for mental health journey for all of us. Mm-hmm.
It shows that you're very hands-on with your business. Even your logo, you were able to construct it. So that's amazing. It really shows that being a nurse entrepreneur, you really need to know what your business is about, what is your branding. That's really important. Now, for your company, what I love the most is you're approaching the patient in a whole totality, body, mind, and soul, a whole person. Why is this important? Not just to treat the diagnosis, but to look at the whole perspective of this.
Mm-hmm. It's super important because I had this conversation with a patient the other day. I kind of use a lot of my family practice background into this, and I explain this to primary care providers also a lot. And I explain the full process to my patients. It's sometimes like getting things like labs or certain labs that we're looking at that absolutely 110% can affect mental health and how you're responding, your energy levels, your quality of sleep, etc. And so I really try to do that deep dive to make sure, okay, let's go through all these things and make sure we're checking like things like thyroid, hemoglobin A1C, vitamin B12, vitamin D. There's a ton, ferritin. There's a ton out there that really can affect our mental health. And so that's kind of the baseline that I always try to get. Also, other diagnoses, like what else are we diagnosed with health-wise that could be impacting us? What else is going on in our environment? What's going on in our lives? How's our relationships? What's our stress level like? And that looks different for each person. So that's why I feel like it's a very unique approach, and it's not a one size fits all. So I actually did a consult just earlier before speaking to you, and it was a patient that said she explained her situation, and she said, well, my primary care doctor just gave me this, and this is just what I've been on, and this is just what I take. I'm like, have we done any kind of testing? Do we even know that that is the correct diagnosis for you? What kind of trauma have you went through? What's your sleep habits like? And she was like, this is the first time I'm being asked a lot of these questions, which in all respect to primary care, they're handling 10,000 other things in a very small appointment. And I always say it's like a piece of the pie. Like they're dealing with the whole pie, and one little sliver of that pie is mental health. And so, that shouldn't be their responsibility really to take that on. Unfortunately, in mental health disparity areas in rural mental health, they are tasked with that because there is not enough PMH&P psychiatrists, therapists in the area that they can refer to. So whether they really signed up for it or not, unfortunately, they are tasked with that. So a lot of it, I get of patients that say, I've never been tested. I've been on meds for a long time. I've never had anybody ask me this. And then they come in, the diagnosis may be completely wrong, and not to, it's not anybody's fault, I think, per se. It's just the time that's allotted for that. We know as mental health providers, it needs to be a very large intake appointment, and that time has to be given to that patient. And you do need to be able to do a thorough job with testing. I mean, I think that is our baseline that we have to go off of. And that includes labs, other diagnoses that kind of weigh in on that could be affecting our mental health.
I definitely agree with you, like the body, mind, and soul approach. And sometimes there could be like overlooked symptoms also of depression.
Yeah.
It could also be dealing with like thyroid issues like hypothyroidism.
Absolutely.
So I think it's a way of like looking at that perspective and also diving deeper, which you told
yes.
audience a while ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Running some labs or even looking at vitamin D level for a lot of patients that have low vitamin D level. Also
Absolutely. And like even something that is not talked about enough is hemoglobin A1C, and how that if you are uncontrolled diabetic, I feel like I have caught so many that didn't even know they were diabetic, and how, okay, that can contribute to a level of depression too. Okay. Because we're losing that level of energy because your body is expending so much to try to bring that blood sugar level down, where that really, I mean, it can be a direct relation to that level of depression that person is experiencing. So, and like you said too, with the thyroid, I think that's a huge one. But I think each individual is different. And also other medications, that's a huge one, where I'll go over their med list. I'm like, okay, what else are we taking here that could also be impacting our mental health? Substances also. Substances, unfortunately, in my area are, I think in everyone's area, is a huge issue and impacts on mental health. Unfortunately, I think in the South, it is very much normalized to, okay, we can go get a case of beer on the weekends, and that's how we're kind of going to cure our sadness and, hang out with our friends. That's pretty normalized, but yet opening up and talking about our feelings and, turning down the dial on that substance use is not normalized. So I think even in my area, it's still very much stigmatized. I always have the old saying of, in the South, we have usually a rug in the room that we like to lift it up and just sweep all the bad things underneath and put it back down like it doesn't exist, because we don't talk about those things in the family. That's always something that I hear often. So that's always an ongoing issue. And I feel like that's everywhere. But for my mental health providers in the South that are listening, they're nodding their heads saying, yep. Because it's definitely something that, especially in these rural communities, it's very much still very much stigmatized to seek that mental health care and even kind of turn down those substances.
Thank you for your insights. And basically, we've made so much progress about mental health. So are there any misconceptions about mental health that we need to retire for good?
I think a huge misconception is if you are seeking mental health care from either a therapist, psychiatrist, PMHNP, that you're automatically signing up for long-term therapy or inpatient or medications. You're not necessarily signing up for those things. And I think people go in a little bit intimidated because that might be something that's holding them back. That's something that they don't want to really sign up for the long term. But oftentimes when they come in, we give that level of education and we do testing and we have the diagnoses correct and we see what you're going through. They see that we're an ally in this together. We're reaching those treatment goals. And I always tell my patients, I'm like, you're the captain of the ship. You are the captain. I am just here with the map and I am helping you kind of, okay, how do we get from this point A to point B? You still are the decision maker. I'm just here to help you along in that process. And so I think patient autonomy is a big thing. I don't want to ever make patients feel like they don't have that autonomy. And unfortunately, patients that have been in systems, when mental health institutions were very much a thing, I have active patients that have had that experience where their autonomy was unfortunately taken away from them. And that's something that, I think outpatient providers can really kind of write a new narrative for patients and kind of change their minds a little bit. I think that's really important to really show them that, hey, it can be different. I had a patient family come to me and the mom came in behalf of her son and was advocating for him. He was struggling with some depression. And she said, I just really don't want to do medications because unfortunately my brother was institutionalized and he just was a zombie. I think we've all heard that term. He was a zombie. And his outcomes were very negative. And so I said, well, if I can't do anything else today, I hope that we can rewrite the script and that we can kind of come to an agreement together, and I can give you that level of education on, the diagnoses that we're landing on, adequate testing, and then going over our medication and treatment options to where you're feeling supported and not pressured. And I'm happy to say that he's doing a lot better, and we're only on one medication. So I don't think it has to be, sometimes less is more in that scenario. And she just thanked me because that was something in my local community that she's like, I never thought I would encourage my own family members to seek out psychiatric care ever again because of that negative experience. So I think, it's something that we continue to have to improve on. I see it a lot in my area where the providers too, I think there can be a level of education that's always needed. We always need to be educating ourselves. That's one thing that at Blooming Minds that, I'm trying to stay up to date on all the current research that is being done. And that's super duper important because it's an ever changing field of what our options are.
Thank you. And I definitely agree with you. Like, really involving the family is also a big piece of the puzzle. We want to make sure also that we get those collateral information from them and making sure that they're heard. Now, we've made so much progress about mental health. We also work with children, teens, and adults. What have you observed as the most common trend among this population? What are your most challenges?
Yes, for sure. I think working with children, teens, and adults, especially my kiddos, I love serving them. I definitely see where we're having more and more, there can be irritability, attention difficulties, emotional dysregulation, and a lot of things like social media can definitely come into play as far as bullying, and disrupted sleep too. And I'm a stickler about cell phone hygiene, whether that's very much the parent decision whether to let them have a cell phone or iPad, but what are we doing as far as those guidelines for sleep? Because we know that our prefrontal cortex is still very much developing. Our brain in general is still developing from a very young age all the way up till, our early 20s. So I think sleep is a huge, huge deal. And like doom scrolling, I've heard, is already going to become a part of our DSM-5 criteria. It's a real thing. So that's a lot of it that goes into it. I feel like, is educating parents and then also having those boundaries in place for what their expectations are. And I think that looks different for each child that I'm serving. But I definitely feel like there is always a limitation in access to care for our children and our teenagers, because not all mental health providers, serve that population. That's something that they don't always do. And I am one of the providers that do that. But I think it kind of goes back to, having access as far as PMHMPs having, full practice authority. That would help the situation because, of multiple reasons, and having those restraints on us and being able to serve more populations, I think is very much needed, especially in rural communities. It's definitely needed. We just don't have enough providers. And that projection I know is not great. For what that continues to look like. So we'll just be hopeful for movement forward for each of our restricted practice states with that.
Thank you for sharing your insights on those specific population. And we know about social media, about the perception, about what is real, what's real, and there's so much expectations for them. Sometimes
Yes.
their body image, and what else, the life that they wanted, comparing their life with their peers. And bullying is big. And we heard stories about teenage suicidal agents and teenage successful attempts. Really something that is disheartening because we could have done some kind risk assessment. So
Right.
that needs to be, I think, a lot of providers also needs to be trained well in terms of service population. Because I have some population, or I mean, students are saying, I'm not gonna do the population such as teens, kids. I'm gonna stay on this specific population. So I really at this, especially as psychiatric providers, dealing with high risk, vulnerable.
Yeah, and I think too, it's, when we think about treating them, I always think about, well, when I'm doing education, if I'm, trying to be mindful about a medication that I'm choosing for a child and why, have we done adequate testing? What's going on in their environment? What else can we change? It's not just medication. And so I think having that open conversation, especially when you have a parent that is super concerned and coming forward to say, we need some help and something's going on here. I think that is probably one of the best things you can do, and probably one of the strongest things you can do for your own child is stepping up and saying, hey, something's not right and we need to do something about it, and being willing to be flexible and make changes. And so I think a level of therapy is definitely needed in their support, because I think there's just so much going on, especially with teenagers. We can all think back and how we were when we were teenagers, but the old saying goes like, oh, well, times have changed. Well, times will continue to change. They're going to continue to change with each generation. But I think what I like to see changing is how open we are now about talking about mental health and coming forward with that. And that's something that I've seen even since my generation of being a teenager myself. I think that has changed in a positive way, which is great. And then I also think too, when you talk about medication for them, I think it always is, like you said, having that open conversation, because a lot of our antidepressants do have black box warnings. That is a real risk. And we need to be reviewing that with the child and the parent. We need to be going over safety within the home. We need to be going over those things. Those are not easy conversations to have, but they are necessary things to have the conversations about, for everyone's safety. And so, and I think that's another reason to see a mental health provider and somebody that's a specialist in that area. You don't want to send a child or really even an adult out on an antidepressant and not be following them closely. I have a general rule in my practice. No one gets out longer than 3 months. And I know some people are going to be like, whoa, that's pretty tight. But especially if I'm starting a new medication, it's way less than that. It's maybe a month, depending on what you have going on. And if you're a kiddo or a teen, then, maybe every couple of weeks we're checking in with one another. And that may seem excessive, but it's also for the patient's safety and making sure we're checking in with one another, especially for those suicidal ideations, because that is a risk, and making sure that we're moving in the positive direction and not the opposite direction is super important. And I'm just very honest when it comes to any kind of prescribing of medications. When we're going to give things a fair balance, risk and benefits, that's something that needs to be reviewed across the board. We know as mental health providers, not one medication fits all and the situation. And sometimes medication's not needed at all. Sometimes it is a level of therapy that we need. And for me, I do a level of talk therapy, more counseling. But if you have some complex PTSD or, an eating disorder, that's not my field of expertise. And all due respect to those therapists that do that, I absolutely love to, in my community, we just have a small group of us that get together and have coffee once a month. We all try to come, and we have, a place where we kind of know each other's niche areas. So I'm like, oh, well, so-and-so actually does that specialty therapy. I can send this patient to her or him. I think that's super important. And then you kind of will learn as a growing clinician of what your niche area is. Like mine is high-level psychiatric medication management. I'm the med lady of the community, I think, when it comes to psychiatry. But if you're looking just for therapy, I can't tell you how many conversations and phone calls that I do where I'm like, I may not be the right fit for you, but here's somebody who is. And I think that as a collective, if we're all doing that as mental health professionals, we may not get, we're not trying to collect patients like playing cards here. We're not trying to collect the whole deck. We're trying to make a full house, right? We're trying to serve those cards that we have in our hands the best. So I am very much a advocate for admitting when I'm like, okay, I'm not the right fit, but here's somebody who is, and that's their niche area.
Thank you for sharing that to our audience, especially a lot of providers right now can relate to what you're telling us, especially if we deal with kids and what are the survival tips that they have. And close monitoring is what I really, really love about what you said, that we really need to follow through, especially with the specific population.
Very true. Yes.
Now, Ms. Paige, you wear so many hats. You're a mom, you're an educator, you are a business owner. How do you balance life, work, and your business? And what will be your advice for those that are adamant to step out of their comfort zone?
For me, I have to go back to, I think each of our values are very different. And so I can't answer that for each person, but for me, it is, the foundation of I'm a wife, I'm a mother first. And then second, I have my career as a clinician. So for me, I think the shift more to private practice kind of opened me up to have more of a flexibility for my family and myself. And I always go back to the old saying of you can't pour from an empty cup. So that is one that I always repeat back to myself, because I'm like, well, could I add this and do that? And if I'm already feeling spent for the week, the answer to that is no. And I think no is a full sentence. And that's something that each of us has to learn as a clinician, whether you're early career or later on in your career. I think a level of boundaries is super important to whether you're working for an entity or you're working for yourself, what you're willing to say yes to and what you're willing to say no to. I think we all have different capacities with that. I have a pretty large cup to pour from when it comes to treating mental health disorders. And that's something I'm passionate about. But also if I'm not feeling like I can give as much at home, and that's what I was kind of feeling, to be honest. And my previous position is I'm like, I kind of wanted to move out of that to where I had more to give to my children and more of that time. And also creating space for education and speaking. That's something else I'm passionate about and I like doing. And I think diversifying us as PMHMPs, whoever's listening, I think find your niche area and what you like to do, whether that's like, oh, I want to go teach, or I want to have a private practice, or maybe I want to do some contract work. I think the options are endless nowadays. You can kind of create your own little puzzle. It's like I have a piece of this, a piece of this, a piece of this, and it all kind of comes together and makes a beautiful painting for yourself as a clinician. But that's different for each of us. And then for me, I think one thing that I've invested in is therapy for myself. And that was super important for me to say, okay, like I need to have a space as a clinician for my own life, previous histories, things like that, and also have a safe space to be able to talk to someone. And so I think that that's super important. And I think if you're in private practice, surrounding yourself in your community that you have other PMHMPs, other NPs, other psychiatrists, MDs, whoever wants to get together and kind of say, this is a safe space, and that we can kind of, number one, network. Number two, we can kind of be there for one another, because private practice can be kind of isolating in that way. So I think making connections like this, even with you, Pedro, like, I mean, you're in Cali and I'm here in Georgia, but that's something that that we can continue and say, hey, like, check in with one another. How are you doing? That kind of thing. That's super important. So I think one thing that I've really loved, and like even in speaking for Psych Congress Elevate this year, and meeting and networking with a lot of those clinicians, was so refreshing, and just really listening to other people's journeys and their stories as clinicians. And those are numbers that I have saved in my phone, that I still am connecting with others that I've met there. And so I'm like, man, I would have never gotten this opportunity if I wouldn't gone to a conference. So don't sleep on your conferences that you have opportunity to. I think there's a great networking, there's great opportunities that you can learn about, that you're like, man, I never thought about that, or I didn't know this was even an option for me with my licensure. There's endless options. So I think even just the connection alone is worth it. Then you're going for education. But that's just another kind of idea that I'm throwing out there that was beneficial for me. But I think also keeping those boundaries really strong. I don't know if anybody listening is familiar with the Enneagram scale. So an Enneagram scale, there's a book that's called The Road Back to You, and the author escapes me. But it is Christian based, but I really love leaning into it because it kind of tells you what personality type that you have. So, and it's something really simple. We've all done kind of personality quizzes, but for me, I'm pretty assertive, and I'm an assertive 8. And so what that means for me is that I, especially being a woman that wants to be in a level of leadership, and I'm very strong-minded, but it's great because you can kind of read your chapter and say, like, I'm reading what myself looks like in healthy times and not so healthy times, and things that I can kind of work on. And that's been very helpful for me because we all have room for growth. There's none of us that are without room for growth. I mean, I think being able to do that is such a privilege as a clinician. So lean into your own therapy.
Thank you, Ms. Paige, for emphasizing about networking and also something else. I agree with you. Sometimes owning a business, opening your private practice, you're trying to navigate things that you feel isolated. That's where you the beauty of attending conferences. That's where you connect with peers and you get some ideas. And then after the conferences, you feel like energized, and you feel like you really go back to your roots, like, oh, this is not isolating at all. Other people feel the same way, and you're all in this together.
I think it can be for me, it was very validating for a lot of things, that I was kind of like, man, am I the only one that is kind of going through this in private practice or learning about a certain disorder? Are there other clinicians that are kind of struggling with treatment options or what's out there as far as new treatments? That's something that I feel like I was able to really gain from a conference like that. So that was something really rewarding, for me. And like you said, you feel pretty energized and validated leaving there. Mm-hmm.
Right. And sometimes being an entrepreneur, you can feel like a roller coaster, right? Up and down of owning a business is really a part of it. And if you're not willing to take the risk, then probably entrepreneurship is not for you. But don't give up.
I think
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think you have to that's something that, I'm pretty early with my business starting, but that's something that it is kind of a leap of faith that you have to take. And I think for each person that looks different. What do you have? Are you a single mom? Are you single dad? What does your support system looks like? Do you have children? Do you not have children? What do you want your finances to look like? I think it's very different, and only really you can answer that. And so for me, I have a great supportive husband. Without my husband, I would definitely not have been able to open my own practice. He jokes all the time, and he's like, just call me Mr. Mom. But I'm like, no, you're just a dad. You are a dad. You're an active, participating father. And so, without him, I would not be able to do half the things that I'm able to do. So I'm so thankful for him. And then for my other family members too. I mean, they have been a great support and friends on this journey, because without their support, I'm like, man, we do need a level of community kind of like cheering us on, like you can do it. I think we, even as clinicians, need that level of validation and that support. So there's always moving parts, and all of us each have different moving parts, so I think it looks different for each of us. But for me, it was a definitive where I definitely have to have that support to make my business work. Insurance, providing your own insurance, something like that is a huge topic of conversation, whether you're going to carry that for yourself in independent practice or not. So that's something to always have if you have a spouse. If you don't, I mean, that's something to think about. There's a whole other private practice conversation to have, but it's a large one to have to think about.
Yes, legalities and also other business expense.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it seems like you're a 24/7 responsibility, since it's you who is the flagship of your own business. And But I strongly believe that if there's a successful woman like you, there's a man behind it. And thank you for.
It's really. I mean, in my case, I would say yes. I mean, I think that the role, and I'll just be honest. I mean, I think that is something also that in my community that is kind of almost a little taboo, to have the role reversed a little bit, because, in my family, I'm very much the breadwinner. And my husband has no problem telling people that, and that's okay. And because I know that, and he knows that I couldn't do that without him. So he's just as much a part of my business as anyone else, as I am. So I think that role reversal is something that is not as readily accepted in the South. And it is becoming more of a normalized thing to have. You can be a mom, you can have a successful career, and sometimes you are the breadwinner of your household. So I think it's a beautiful thing and whether if you're a stay-at-home mom and you're a support of your husband or wife going to work or school or whatever that is, it's a partnership. So I think if there's a collective goal there, open communication is definitely very necessary, and what those goals are for your family.
Yes, and always remember that it takes two to tango. So those support system that you have, please protect them. Your inner circle are the ones also that makes you uplift you. Then those are things that we really need to have in our life to be successful. What will be your advice for those who are early career psych NPs that are starting to feel burnout?
I mean, I think it's all about balance. And I mean, it's easier said than done, right? To be like, well, I need to tell this entity that I only want to see this many patients. That's not always doable. And they may not accept that. I think that's why I said two options are a big thing of, okay, well, maybe you can do a 1099 contract and maybe you do have more control over your schedule, or you're like, this said entity really drains me, or the administration's not great, or whatever it is, but I love the patient population there. Maybe you only work there 1 or 2 days a week, and then maybe find another job somewhere else, maybe in private practice. I do feel like you need to have at least a couple of years of experience before you go into private practice, because I think the basis of private practice, you do really need to have a level of strong clinical skills. I really think that that's just my personal belief. And you need to have a good foundation to stand on. So I think those of us that were nurses before whether you did the nursing track or you're a PA, whatever the track was before, it's kind of like dues paid. I don't love that, but it's almost like, well, this is a kind of a short time of like, okay, I need to kind of pay these dues and get these hours in and see these many patients, and then maybe I can move on to something else. But it doesn't have to be. I don't think that the times of that is kind of changing a little bit, especially in my area. It's very much so, well, maybe that's a short time in your life and where you're seeing a high amount of patients and really high acuity, and maybe you can shift into something else and create that balance. I'd say early on, get your own therapist. I think that's super important. I think surround yourself with other clinicians that are like-minded like you, and you know who that is. It can be isolating. It is very heavy some days. I think that's why therapy is super important for us as clinicians to have. And then, know your boundaries early on. Figure out what your boundaries are. I think that when we work for other entities, it is very easy for those boundaries to be pushed. And you have to stand firm on the word no. And also about compensation. Like, well, if I'm doing XYZ, or I'm doing this amount of work, or I'm working this much longer, I've had clinicians tell me, oh, like, I don't get compensated for that. And I'm like, that would be a no for me. That wouldn't be part of my itinerary. And I think the days are kind of coming to an end where there is a level of compassion fatigue. It's like, okay, we have to find that balance to where, okay, maybe less patients is better for the longevity. And if you have a place that is willing to listen, and sometimes you can get that higher billing if you are billing insurance, you can bill for a higher amount of time if you have that patient for a longer amount of time, and you're able to do a great assessment. You can kind of pitch it both ways instead of seeing every 15 minutes, creating spaces for those more complex patients and making sure you have time kind of drilled out for them in your schedule. And everybody knows who those patients are pretty early on. They need that higher level of care. And then you kind of feel supported where you're like, okay, I have a little bit of extra time with this patient and I can really kind of pour into them a little bit more. So I'm not feeling like I have to chase 10 notes at the end of the day. I know one helpful thing to me is, using different softwares to help you with your note. I know that's kind of controversial, but as long as you're talking with your patients about consent, as long as they're okay with that, that's something that if it's helpful to you as a clinician, look at all those different tools that are available to you now.
Thank you. And openness about different AI or AI platforms that could help you with your documentation. Now, behind these microphones that we have right now are people that are struggling with their provider, it could be patients out there. What will be your message for them, and where can they find you?
So as far as where to find me, I'm in Thomasville, Georgia, so I'm pretty easily accessible. I think my website is the best way to get in contact with me. If you're a Florida, Georgia client, if you live in either one of those states, you can do telehealth or in person. So that's available. I don't require a referral from a primary care physician. You can go directly to my website, Blooming Minds Psychiatry, and follow that link, fill out the intake form. I intentionally set it up that way for a couple of reasons. I want to make sure that we're a good fit, that I'm able to serve your needs well. And so I like to be able to have potential patients, put what they're really looking for and what they're going through on that intake form. And only I see that. And so it's very HIPAA compliant. And I just review that and I see if we're a good fit. And sometimes the answer is no, I'll be honest. Sometimes it's, I might not be their best fit, but I always try to get you in contact with maybe somebody in the community that is a good fit for your needs, and give you some options. And I think we should all be in that space of like, well, I'm not the best fit, but maybe somebody over here is. And so it's a really easy process. And so I intentionally set it up that way. I had a primary care office reach reach out to me recently and wanted to send me a referral. I'm like, you don't have to send me a referral. You can actually, I want the patient to do it themselves. And so she sat with the patient while they were in her office and they did it together. So that was something really simple that could be done.
And what will be your message for them?
Oh, for as far as seeking care?
Yes.
So I would say, no matter what state you're in, if you're in Florida, Georgia, California, I would just say, if you're looking at providers, look for somebody who really specializes in the area that you're looking for. Not all of us are specializing in the same area. So I think Psychology Today is another good website to go to kind of filter through. Do they take insurance? Do they not take insurance? What are their specialty areas? Do they take kids? Do they take adolescents, etc.? Do they do substance abuse treatment? Do they not do substance abuse treatment? I think a lot of that goes into question. So I think that intake form for me is something that's very helpful. And so you're not having to, from the provider side of things, you're also not having to, go through a bunch of referrals that are really, not useful for you as a provider. But I think just going into treatment with an open mind. And I think, a lot of us are out here trying to repave the way of maybe old misconceptions about psychiatry in general. I know, like that story that I mentioned, I have probably 10 other ones that kind of align with that, where, negative experiences unfortunately do happen. And so I never want to contribute to that negative experience. I'm trying to change that outlook for patients and for families. And so whether I'm the one that's doing that or another provider, I think just finding that right fit. I mean, it does take some time sometimes, but once you find it, I think that's a good relationship to lean into and let us support you. And I think just like any other organ in your body, you go see a cardiologist for your heart, a pulmonologist for your lungs. I mean, we have to live in our own heads every single day. Our brain is a major organ. And so why aren't we investing care into our minds, into our brains? I mean, I think that is, when we look at it that way and look at the body holistically, I mean, there's really no better fit as far as trying to treat. We're not just treating from here up either. We're treating the whole body, but just considering all those things when you're going into treatment.
Thank you, Paige. And what excites you about the future of psychiatry?
There's so much, Pedro, that excites me about the future of psychiatry. I think I say this a lot of times when I speak, is that it's just an exciting time, especially in psychiatric medication. It's about time is what I want to just do some claps, because it's about time that we had some new options and we're getting them. And that's so exciting. And I think there's even more to come and even more to look forward to, which is great, because I just look at medications for us as clinicians, especially our prescribing providers. There is a tool in our tool belt. Not one tool is going to fix the job. We need to have multiple tools to be able to choose from. I like to have options on the table and new research that backs that up. So I think that I really love a lot of the work being done with glutamate right now. There's a lot of studies on glutamate, that psychedelics, they're coming out too. So I think TMS is another area. If you don't want to do medications, TMS is an option. I just think that it's endless. I think that we're going to see a lot in our career come out that we have never seen before. And I think for our psychiatrists, PMH and Ps, our prescribing providers, we need to hold on and get ready, because it's about to be a wild ride of education. So for me, I'm definitely on that train, and I'm ready to learn as much as I can, because my goal is, let me educate myself to the highest level so that I can offer my patients the best option, whether that be a drug that came out 20 years ago or something that is brand new that fits their needs and may have a better side effect profile.
Thank you. And so excited also with all the treatment options that you have mentioned, and they kind of like we bring innovations to psychiatry, and it's not like a traditional one before that it's all about medication. Now patients have options.
Yes. Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Paige. And here at Mindful Moments, we believe with self-care. If there's anybody that is listening into this podcast, can you tell us one mindful habit or self-care techniques that you want to share that created an impact in a positive way with you?
I would say sleep is a big one. I think making sure you keep good sleep hygiene practices is a big one. Whether you're a clinician, whether you're a patient of a clinician, I think that that's super important. I think pouring into yourself and self-care, whatever that is, that can look different for each of us. For me, I like to go to get my nails done. I like to go spend time outside in my garden. I'm a country girl at heart. I have a lot of animals. I have chickens, goats, all the things. And so for me, that brings me a lot of joy. So I always say we have to have that balance in creating space for those things, and that has to be a priority. And I think it's easier said than done when we're trying to push forward in a career, but you do have to create those spaces of, okay, I'm just going to be my silly self outside and go garden and go play with my animals, play with my children. I mean, I think that that's super important. Also, just remembering, I think that, and like I said, investing in your own therapy early on as a career clinician and even as a patient, I think that there is value in that, definitive value. And then remembering, I like the mantra that I hold is you can't pour from an empty cup. So whether you're, a patient hearing this or a clinician and you need to take some time off and really step back and kind of recollect your thoughts about, well, what do I want my career to look like? You're in control of that. No one else is. And so I'm a firm believer is that you just have to take the reins yourself and kind of decide that for yourself. And sometimes taking a step back and taking a break should be normalized. We should normalize that more when clinicians need that support, and creating a space for other referrals for clinicians if like they're out of practice right now, or they need to take some time off for vacation or whatever it is, because we deserve that just as much as everyone else. We can't continue to pour from an empty cup, and that's just something we should take very seriously.
Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing us to be part of your
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you
so
so
for
much
those
for
who are
having me.
tuning in, please check her social media and also her website. And she will be in Psych Congress in New Orleans, right? So if you guys
I will be attending Psych Congress in New Orleans. So if you're there, reach out to me. I would love to connect. So I think it's a great conference to attend for sure. So yeah, reach out if you're there.
Thank you, Ms. Paige, and she's available to connect with and a great network. So make sure you guys check on her website.
Thanks for listening to Mindful Moments with Pedro Morante. Be sure to follow the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. If you find value in our time together, leave a quick review. It helps more people discover the space we're creating. For updates and more reflections, follow us on social media. Until next time, take care.